Hello everyone. I hope this webinar will give you some really useful ideas. My name is Karen Saxby and I'll be joined at the end of the webinar by Tom Booth, the Digital Content Manager at Cambridge English Language Assessment, and we'll answer any questions you may have. I'll begin by saying just a little bit about me. After studying architecture, I worked for an international organisation in Geneva, Switzerland in my 20s, where I worked as a graphic artist. I frequently found myself helping colleagues and friends there with their English, and after returning to England, I decided to become an English language teacher. I trained and then taught English in a variety of situations for about 20 years. But for the last 15 years, I've been a full-time writer of testing and teaching materials for Cambridge Assessment, Cambridge University Press, and other providers and publishers. Okay, what I'm hoping to do today is offer some ideas that might encourage your young learners' parents to take part in their child's English language learning experience. We'll begin by exploring why parents might want or not want to support their child's or older students' language learning experience at home. Then we'll rethink why we learn language and what language is for, which should also help us why a parent's help is so very valuable. And then we'll look at a few practical ways in which parents can help their children, even if they have little English themselves. And we've prepared a handout for you which you can download. This lists lots of activity ideas for parents to use with their children. Sadly, we won't have time to go through many of those in the session. So firstly, why might a parent want to help their child's English language learning? What do you think? Please write your ideas in the chat box now. Okay, thank you. Here are a few ideas we thought of, quite similar to some of yours. Parents might be very ambitious for their child. They might want their child to pass tests or even become bilingual. When I lived in Geneva, where the first language is French, but English is also spoken widely, my French-speaking friends all wanted their children to learn English, and my English-speaking friends wanted their children to become fluent in French, so they could integrate more fully in their present community or in a community they may move to in the future, of course. Some learners in school are in schools where the teachers use English to study other school subjects, the content and language integrated learning or CLIL approach, where, say, geography or maths is taught in English as well as or instead of the first language. And parents might just want to have fun, to share some precious time doing something that's enjoyable, useful and educational. In an ideal world, young learners, indeed any school-age child, can really benefit from support by both teachers and parents whose shared role is to lead these dependent little people with lots to learn to mature, happy, independent young adults, probably with still lots to learn. I think we can divide this role into 4 distinctive parts. If any of you are interested in Jungian psychology, you might recognise these. Firstly, a child needs to be given information, and then they need to be given a sense of direction. By that, I mean how to use the information that they've learnt. These 2 roles are very present in the language classroom. We teach students words and structures and how to say or write what they need to say or write. But students also need to feel someone cares about their progress. They need to feel supported and important. And they need to be brave, to have the courage or be energised to carry out their tasks. They need to feel safe enough to take risks so they can continue to widen their experiences and skills. In an ideal classroom, the teacher provides all 4 roles, but that's a difficult task when working with perhaps 20 or more children at a time. However, a parent can very easily provide the caring and courage-giving roles at home, working one-to-one. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. The roles relate to the 4 essential Jungian functions, those that everyone needs really to internalise, to progress in life happily. I think, I know, I feel, and I do. In many stories, we find archetypal characters that represent those 4 essential functions. I think, I feel, I know, I do. Do you remember the story? In The Wizard of Oz, the straw man had no brain. He needed information. The Tin Man had no heart. He needed to learn more about feelings. The lion had no courage. He needed to feel brave so he could go and do what he needed to do. And Dorothy knew the direction to take, the way down the yellow brick road, which led to the realisation that the characters had become inventive, caring, good decision makers, responsible and happy. And think about it. In any good working team, you need to have a creative ideas person, someone who cares how everybody is and who's good at empathy and communication, someone who'll make the best judgments to lead the team, and someone who'll be brave enough to carry out difficult tasks and work hard and probably do overtime. We learn subconsciously that these 4 functions are really important. We learn that in stories and through observing others who are happy. The 4 functions are demonstrated by parents and teachers as the child grows and are slowly internalised by the child as they develop. The child then learns to use them in their own relationships with others. But how easy is it to provide all 4 kinds of support? A teacher might not have the time to care for or give courage to every student, or to give individual attention to every child, or practically have enough appropriate material for the unique needs of each child. But what about parents? Let's think about them again for a minute. Why might they feel they can't help? A parent, for example, might not feel they can help because they have very little English. They might not know which materials to use at home. They might not feel confident enough to give their child a lot of useful direction. Some parents will really want to help, whether they have good English or not. Some may have lots of free time, some may have no free time. Some may think practicing English is wholly the teacher's job. Some may think that learning English is really important. Others might think other subjects are far more important. What about your learners' parents, your students' parents? Do you think they could provide lots of help with their students, with their child, English language learning? Or might they prefer not to get involved? Maybe they're tiger parents. Have you heard of that expression? A tiger parent might say, no, you can't go out for a bike ride, you've got to stay in and learn those irregular verbs. You can't play on the computer, I want you to read this text and then answer all these questions. Everyone is different, and every parent-child relationship is different, and we must respect and remember that as teachers. Which statement in general applies to the parents of your students? Choose the polling button A, B, C or D. Yeah, lots of interesting answers coming up here. B's and C's, I think, for the most part. I'm not sure yet. C's, D's, yes, quite a big variety. Looks like it's between B and C, so they sometimes offer support and they might offer a little support. Oh, hang on, but lots actually don't get involved. All right, well, here's a fantastic opportunity to get them involved. As we've said, every parent-child teacher and every parent-child teacher situation will be a unique mix of differences, and there is no single approach we can take as teachers to persuade parents to help their child more at home. That's normal and expected and fine, but I hope that becoming more aware of the amount and kind of support your students' parents can give, and more aware of the type of teacher you are perhaps, will be useful. Okay, let's move on to another consideration now. The reasons why we learn a second language. Well, let's go back to basics. Many people will say we learn a second language, English for example, to pass tests and perhaps have a wider choice of career in the future. But what do we use our first language for? Thinking about this question should also help us find ways to engage parents in their child's language learning experience more. We use our first language to say what we think, what we need, what we agree, what we disagree with, what we like, what we hate, what we want to happen. We use language to express our personality and individuality. I am expressing my personality and individuality by talking in the way that I am now about this subject. I'm choosing what to say and which words to use. Other people talking about this subject would probably choose to say different things in different ways because they are different from me. We use language to read and learn about our world. Without language, we cannot learn about our communities, our histories, our culture. We can't really learn anything. We use language to listen. You're doing that now. And if you ask me questions, I'd listen and try to answer them. I hope. So language is an essential social tool. We need language to connect with other people, perhaps in the same room or on the other side of the world. So, hello Melis in Turkey, and hello, I'm sorry I've forgotten your name, Irina in Russia, and someone in Australia, wonderful country. I hope you're finding this webinar useful. Imagine that this collection of toys in this picture represents one student's knowledge of English, one young student's knowledge of English perhaps. Let's say that the toys we can see on the 5 shelves in the middle of this picture represent the Cambridge English Young Learners Defined Grammar Structures and Defined Word Lists. She'll have learnt these in her Young Learners class, school perhaps. The collection of toys on the other shelves represents the language that is personal to her interests or situation. Language she's learnt outside the classroom, perhaps by reading certain books, playing games, watching films, listening to song lyrics, travelling, through conversations, that kind of thing. This language will be slightly different from her best friends. In fact, it'll be different from everyone's. This is the language she's learnt that shows how her personality, her interests, dreams, ambitions and feelings are different from those of her friends. These words might not be on the Cambridge English Young Learners word list or any other word list, but to her, your learner, they are just as important, if not more important. So let's think about how a teacher can engage a parent's help with their child's English learning, even if that parent has limited English language skills themselves. If we understand that language is not just a list of word and grammar structures, the information and direction, we start realising how vital a parent's role is, even if the parent has very little English. Remembering the importance of all 4 roles. A parent can help trigger a child's intrinsic motivation, the eagerness to learn that comes from within the child. If the child is having fun doing a variety of activities in English that are interesting, they'll want to do more, especially if the child can make some personal choices about what to do. That's empowering. And also if they're doing activities that give them an opportunity to say something that they really want to say or write. The word personal is important. To trigger intrinsic motivation, the child needs to be able to say what they want to say. It would be really difficult for a teacher to make enough time in a class for everyone to answer a question such as, what do you like doing? But at home, that wouldn't be a problem. It's also important to remember that young children, and older students too to a certain extent, live in the immediate moment. If they have an idea, they don't want to wait to express it or to wait for a response. With 20 students in a class, the teacher can't provide that opportunity, but a parent working one-to-one with their child can, of course. You can support a parent more by giving them information about what you're doing in class. If you are someone who is preparing your class to take the Cambridge English Young Learners tests, you can familiarise parents with the tasks and show them past papers and where to find sample test papers online. That information will give parents more ideas about how to help. We'll give you the online links to some of those tasks at the end of this webinar. I know that not many of you are actually preparing for this particular test, but here is a task from the Cambridge English Movers Speaking Test. It's a find the difference task. The learner needs to spot the picture in each row that's different and say why it's different from the others. Let's look at the third row. You can see 3 animals, a panda, a rabbit and a kangaroo. These words are all on the Cambridge English Movers word list. So the sweater is different because it's not an animal. Why do you think this kind of activity is popular with younger students? Type your ideas in the chat box. Thank you. Yes, it's visual, absolutely, and colourful and fun. It's interactive. Yeah, great ideas. Thank you, everybody. Because this age group loves doing puzzles, they do, don't they? And activities that involve pictures as well. You can also show parents where to find online the Cambridge English Young Learners word lists and grammar syllabus. Here you can see part of the alphabetical Cambridge English Movers list. I wouldn't suggest parents use these word lists to test, say, all the words that begin with A and so on. That wouldn't be much fun. I would always advise, remembering that intrinsic motivation we want to trigger, that the child works stress-free at home, and remember that work should be communicative, fun and interesting. A parent could use words from topic lists instead, which you can see part of here. This is for the same exam. You'll see that words are listed under headings like animals, clothes, colours, the home, etc. Parents can work from the appropriate section for the child's level and ask questions such as, which is your favourite animal? Where's your eye, ear, mouth? What are you wearing today? What would you like to wear today? You could also remind parents about the Cambridge English Young Learners ethos, that tasks are designed to be fun, interesting and varied. So the work parents do at home, especially with young children, should be fun, interesting and varied too. The language should also be useful. Words that a young child or an older child might naturally want to use in their first language. The vocabulary lists for the YLE tests have been designed very much with that in mind. We build the child's world as they work up through the 3 levels. At Cambridge English Starters, the word list is all about family, animals, life at home and school. At Movers, we add words about the natural world and town as the child begins to explore their wider world. And at Flyers, learners meet texts about jobs, dinosaurs and planets. So topics get wider as children grow up and develop more sophisticated interests. If a child is taking a test that's fun, interesting and engaging, coursework should ideally take a similar approach at school and at home. There are lots of creative resources to use, and we'll look at some ideas in a moment. Tell parents which books you use and perhaps advise them to use others you think will help too. But also remind parents that anything that interests the child will be useful. Any work that a parent does with their child that is fun, interesting and engaging will be helpful, mimicking, if you like, the natural, stress-free, fun way they developed their first language. That's really important. Here are some more points to share. Making mistakes is natural and normal. Why else would we put rubbers on the ends of pencils? Mistakes bring useful opportunities for learning. If a child is scared of making mistakes and only uses the language they know is correct, they won't progress as quickly as the child who isn't afraid of making mistakes. You might tell parents the kinds of mistakes you made when you were learning English, or the kinds of mistakes that young children whose first language is English make. I hear things like, I losted my bestest ball, I goed to the park. So advise parents not to make a fuss about mistakes, especially if the child is speaking. Stopping a child to correct a mistake will impede fluency and confidence. And using language like, no, that's wrong, might shame a child. A child who's feeling ashamed or worried is unlikely to want to carry on talking. You can also tell parents that children often learn language more easily through doing creative activities such as drawing a picture and then talking about it, or role-playing, for example. With young children, both parent and child pretending to be aliens arriving on Earth, for example. And I'm sure you can think of interesting plays for older students as well. To find out how their child learns more easily, parents can do very simple activity. We'll do that now. I'd like you to trust in me and close your eyes and imagine you're sitting on a beach. Close your eyes now. What are you experiencing in your imagination? I hope you're enjoying this. Okay, open your eyes now and type in a couple of words. Let's see what you said. Oh, sound of waves. Sound of waves, that's coming up. Beautiful sea. Peace, calm. Wow. Lots of kinesthetic people here. Lots of visual people and lots of aural people. Okay, so thanks. If you heard something like, if you heard something first, like the sound of the sea, you'll most likely learn well through listening to language. I wonder if that's correct for you. If you saw something first, such as the blue sky, you'll most likely learn more easily through looking at or reading information. That's me, actually. Might that be true for you too? If you felt something first, like the warmth of the sun or the sand, you will most likely learn through perhaps playing games or drawing or moving, something like that. We're all a mixture of all three approaches to learning, but it might be interesting for a parent to find that out about their child. They should do the activity, by the way, in the child's first language, so any vocabulary gaps don't impact on their answer. Pictures are wonderful resources, especially for visual and kinesthetic learners. There are several ideas for using pictures in the handout. Stories are wonderfully useful too, because when we read or listen to a story, our emotional buttons are pushed. We all laugh out loud or feel worried or scared or even cry when we read a book or watch a film. That's because we become emotionally part of the story. We like some of the characters and perhaps hate others, just like in real life. And because of this social and emotional connection with the story, we remember the language, we process and store it in a different way. Our imaginations and emotions create different chemical environments in our brains. And please remember, even if the child and the parent doesn't understand all the words in a story, that's fine. They'll be absorbing language in the same way they develop their first language. It would be wonderful if parents read stories in English to their young children or encouraged children and older students to read stories themselves or listen to audiobooks. Storytelling, story reading is such a gift. I'm a huge fan and believer of this. A few minutes of different kinds of practice will really help. On a car journey, for example, a parent could ask, what colour's that car? And that one. And the child will be answering red, blue, black and white. You're teaching colours. This is just a half-minute game, but it's fun, it's connecting, and it's listening, and it's speaking. Or having a 1-minute moment at a mealtime where parents and child can only speak in English. This is my favourite dinner. I hate tomatoes. Whatever the child wants to say. Language will be building in a natural, stress-free and personal way, which promotes that intrinsic motivation. It's what we want to happen. You can find a summary of these ideas in your handout. Please look at that after this seminar. Let's recap a little. Even if parents feel they can't give a lot of information or direction because they only have beginner's English themselves, they can give their undivided attention to their child. That's the important role of caring. They can encourage the child to be braver when they speak by not putting any pressure on them and not telling them off for making mistakes. That's the important courage-giving role. Their child will feel more confident as a result. They then might dare to offer more answers in class. They'll trust and believe in themselves more. So regardless of their own level of English, a parent can find time, hopefully, to encourage and show interest in what their child is doing. They can provide material for their child to read or listen to, which represents their son's or daughter's unique interests. Building boats, making kites, collecting insects, working in a theatre, doing doing particle physics, whatever. And if the focus is on fun, both parent and child can enjoy the moment, and maybe each of them will learn something new. So, tell parents about the Cambridge English Young Learners tests and tasks, if you think that's appropriate. Children will be practicing those at school, of course, so for parents this is probably just background information. But there will be tasks, especially picture ones, that parents could easily copy to do at home, and you can encourage parents to do activities that involve the word lists, as we mentioned earlier. Also, tell parents, although the tests will be the same for all the students, and regardless of tests, not only the YLE tests, their child's language needs are absolutely unique in order to communicate all their own observations, opinions and ideas. So anything the child does at home will help develop the language the child will need for the test in one way or another. It really doesn't matter if their child is using English to learn how to make cakes, or listen to a pirate song, or learn how to drive. They will be learning. They are using their own interests to promote learning, and that's great. A parent can also be reminded that they can be fantastically supportive because they know best how to encourage their child. And the more creative, fun, varied and interesting the work they do at home is, the more likely their child will progress. So even if parents of your students really love giving the child dictations, suggest that the dictations are funny and that perhaps the child gives their parent a dictation to check afterwards too. That's something to think about. So do take a look at your handout with the list of activities to do at home, which you can use to give parents lots and lots of fun learning ideas. Remind parents that reading or listening to stories, ones that their child and their friends will be interested in, is always going to help. You'll also find information for parents and activities to do with their children on the Cambridge English Language Assessment website. There are short articles written in simple English with tips and advice for parents, as well as interactive games and activities at various levels that parents and children can play. We'll send you the link to this page after the webinar. Watching cartoons or English language films are fun activities too. This is not a waste of time. Children will be learning vocabulary and phrasing simply by hearing it. Creating fact files is fun too. For example, a child might collect information about their favourite football team, animal, pop group, fashion designer, inventor, film star, etc., and fill a scrapbook with texts and labelled pictures. Children who are kinesthetic learners usually really enjoy cutting out, drawing and labelling or colouring. And remember too that colouring in is a task found at all 3 levels in the Cambridge English Young Learners listening paper. So children could simply find a line drawing, colour it in and then talk about the colours they chose or colour parts of the picture as instructed by a parent. That actually mimics an exam task very closely. Another nice idea is to create a favourite word box. Children can cover an empty shoebox, for example, with nice wrapping paper and fill it with their favourite or newly learnt words. They could write the word on a piece of card and draw a picture to illustrate it, or cut out photographs from a magazine or print pictures from online image banks, which they then label to put in their word box. It's good to empower the child by suggesting they find 3 new words to teach their parent too. Shared learning can be lots of fun. Parents and children can also explore interactive English language learning websites. You'll find links to those on your handout. Making flashcards with young children is also something that can be really enjoyed, and there are lots of ideas for using flashcards in the handout. Playing board games can be fun too. In our home we play bilingual Scrabble. It's usually chaotic, but it's lots of fun. We talked about minute-long activities, but you could add guessing games like What's in my hand, Where's the ruler, I spy, etc., which can be enjoyed on car journeys to school or at meal times or whenever. Parents can encourage their child to talk about their favourite picture, film or game. For young learners, Minecraft seems to be universally popular. An incredible game for this age group. Parents can play memory games, objects on a tray, seen for 1 minute, for example. Or share time doing crosswords or word searches. The child could even create a crossword puzzle or word search for the parent to complete. So let's just summarise the last few points. The parent can really customise and tailor fit the word they do at home to make it as appropriate and relevant as possible to their child's level, interests and needs, to help fill all those shelves with wonderful toys. Parents can provide the most appropriate books and find the best websites that they know their child will enjoy working with. A parent can show they care about their child's progress without putting any pressure on the child to gain high marks or to be measured against classmates. They can work at a speed which uniquely suits their child. And they can model their own enthusiasm, which should encourage the child's own intrinsic motivation to have some extra English fun at home. Let's not call it homework. So do download the handout if you haven't done that already, and you can find more activities on the Cambridge English website too. I'll just finish by saying a little about the Cambridge English Young Learners tests for anyone who isn't familiar with them, which may be quite a lot of you. They assess all 4 skills through a range of fun tasks. The language in these tests very much represent the child's world. So they go on bike rides through the park, they might talk to an astronaut, they might visit a chocolate factory or go to a dinosaur museum, for example. The child's results are not reported as pass or fail. They receive an indication of how well they did in each of the 3 papers: reading and writing, listening and speaking. These tests are a very good way for children to start their journey in learning English and serves as a great introduction to the rest of the Cambridge English for Schools exams. Here you can see how the Cambridge English Young Learners tests fit into the rest of the Cambridge English suite of exams. And as I said, the tests, starters, movers and flyers, are a gentle and fun introduction at pre-A1, A1 and A2 levels to the higher level Cambridge English exams. Hello again.
Hello.
Thank you very much for your questions. There are a few here that we'd like to answer if we can. Hope that our answers will be helpful. So one person said that they feel that some people might think that teaching preschool students is a waste of time and money. What do you think? Wow, that's a really big question. I'm going to take my glasses off, it'll help me think better. I think the most important thing to remember is that up until about the age of 7, children learn language in a completely different way from how they learn it later on. And teaching will be far more effective with pre-7-year-olds than it will be, for example, for children who are older than that. And this is for various reasons. To begin with, a child up until the age of 7 is able to hear the phonemes, the sounds of a language, in a much more accurate way. They'll be able to discern the difference between two different sounds that they simply won't be able to they simply won't be able to hear as they get older. That is a fact. And also, children who are very young don't feel self-conscious as much as older children. So children will risk, they'll risk learning a second language far more enthusiastically and in a less anxious way than an older child who starts thinking, oh, what are the other people thinking of me? Or other people are listening to me and I don't want to say anything because I don't want them to think that I'm stupid. And also older children begin to measure themselves, as I said, far more against other children in the class. So if you can get young children, preschool children, to start learning English, we don't need them to write, we just need to expose them to the language, which is exactly, of course, the experience that they had with their first language. And then they can, it's really interesting actually, I taught some very young children French at one stage, and they start mixing the languages. So if any of you speak French or not speak French, I'll just tell you that gomme in French is rubber. And they'd say, Madame, he's taken me gomme, when they were doing an activity. And so they kind of quite naturally start absorbing the language. So get your students young, and I would never ever say that it was a waste of time. So whatever exposure they could have to English, I'm sure you'd agree with me, Tom,
absolutely, yeah,
is going to be fabulous investment for later on.
And even if it's not kind of serious sitting down learning,
absolutely,
games, songs,
yes,
things
yes.
like that will have a
just watching cartoons on television, anything like that. The child learns it in exactly the same way as they learn their first language.
Absolutely, yeah, great. We had a question about parents who maybe don't have the time or the energy to engage in their child's learning, and that's a really common question. We get asked that kind of question a lot, and I think it's a really important point, because some parents obviously don't have the time, or
sure,
perhaps they're not inclined to get particularly involved with their child's language learning. If you look at when you have the time, when you get round to it later, to look at the handout that comes with this webinar, there are lots of different activities, and some of them actually can be done with very little or no time. For example, there's lots of things that parents can do in the car while they're driving to school or home from school. There are things that parents can do in the car with their child.
Yeah.
And even if they've got no time at all to share with their child with their language learning, they can still help by just encouraging and showing interest. They can just, even in their first language, they can ask, so how was your English class today? What
Very
did you learn
definitely.
Today?
I think that's an important point. Don't be afraid to use the first language. You know, that's fine.
Exactly, I think so. And also, even if you're not actually sitting down with your child and helping them learn, you can still encourage them, and maybe things, if your child's got a particular interest or a hobby, of course the internet's a fantastic tool. If your child can watch videos or talk to people about their favourite hobbies in English, then that's a fantastic resource as well, without the parent having to spend any time on that.
That's right. Somebody else mentioned that as a teacher they would like to perhaps be more effective at the caregiving and courage-giving roles in the classroom. And I know that that's a tough one, because, as I said, if you've got 20 students in the class, then that is difficult. But just by, you know, enthusiasm is so contagious. If you can show your own enthusiasm, you are bringing them in, you're bringing that fun element in, you're being supportive. Include everybody as well. If you can make sure that, you know, you make eye contact with everybody. I know that as a teacher, very often I used to find myself looking at the more able students because I knew that they would give me the answer, or looking at the children who would never say anything and perhaps putting pressure on them to give an answer. Don't put pressure on anybody. Just even one-word answers are fine. You want to kind of engender that atmosphere of encouragement, positive atmosphere, and as I said in the webinar, don't worry too much about making mistakes. That is not something that I would suggest that you focus on, because if you know, put them in your back pocket, remember the mistakes, and use find a moment in a future class to cover that point, so that children have learnt how to correct themselves, but don't focus on it in the moment, because, as I said, you risk shaming a child or just making everybody think, oh, I don't want to say anything now. You know, that sort of
Absolutely,
thing.
yeah. Okay, we had a couple of questions which are kind of related. One person asked about parents who are worried about their own accent, and someone else asked about parents who might have no English themselves at all. And they're really important questions too, I think. If parents are worried about their own accent, I think parents shouldn't worry too much about their own accent. I think at a young age, children are quite, as you said, quite discerning about accent. They will know that they won't just copy their parent. They'll hear different accents and be able to discern the difference between them, I think.
It might also be fun for the child to correct the parent's accent.
Well, maybe.
The teacher says it like this.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And
That's empowering.
of course, around the world, most people who speak English don't always speak to other native speakers as well. English is often spoken as a language amongst non-native speakers too.
That's
so
correct.
Being a perfect native speaker isn't always
Of course not.
the goal for
Yes.
a language learner. And of course, at a young age, communication and fun is the most important thing, and parents can do that, whatever their level of language.
Yes.
Also, if a parent is worried about the child getting exposure to different accents, and of course there's plenty of videos, for example, on the Cambridge English YouTube channel and in many other places, there are lots of videos where children can watch and listen to examples of different native speaker accents as well. And if a parent has no English at all, of course, that's a completely different situation. If a parent has no English and want to help their child to learn English themselves. So if you look at the handout which comes with this webinar, there are some activities which do require the parent to speak English and communicate, but there are some which don't as well, aren't there?
Yes, that's right. We mentioned that earlier. Yes, that's true.
So there's plenty of things parents can do and to encourage their child. And also parents can, as I mentioned before, just generally show an interest in the first language, in the child's language learning. And why not ask the child to teach the parent?
Of course.
Often, teaching someone something is a really good way to solidify it in your memory. And certainly when I was teaching, my knowledge of English grammar and phonology got a lot better when I was teaching English as a foreign language.
I know of a student who taught their parents a song that they had learnt in class.
Right.
Yeah. No, anything like that is great. There was, I don't think we've got very much more time, but there was one question right at the end, and I think it was, I've lost it, but it was about a child who hated English, but the parents wanted them to learn it. And that always makes me feel really sad, because there will always be a reason why a child hates English. That child was not born with a hatred of English. The hate of English will be probably sourced or within a fear of making mistakes, or perhaps that child has been told that they make lots of mistakes, as I said, and feel ashamed, or they realise that everybody else in the class is better than they are, or they get told off, or there'll always be a reason for that. And I think that that is basically a question of trying to make the language learning experience stress-free, fun, engaging, and anything that you do with that child has to be varied. Children have very short attention spans, especially young children, and I've got a friend who's a primary school teacher who actually tells all the children in her class every minute or so to stand up and jump to the west, or put their arms in the air, or something to just bring them back into the classroom, to keep their engagement alive and willing. And yes, it makes me feel very sad when I hear that somebody hates English. It makes me want to pack a suitcase and come and read them a story and make them laugh. I think that's about it, isn't it, Tom? Have we got any more time?
We might have. There was one question someone asked about. You mentioned that 4 different things that people need to learn. So there's the information and the direction. You asked about how teachers can be more caring and courage giving.
I think we've covered that a little bit by saying that even if you just bring your own enthusiasm to the classroom and make eye contact with everybody, and make sure that you notice everybody and you get something from everybody, so that everybody feels that it's important, that they are important, that the teacher has noticed them, that they have been heard, that they've been seen in that lesson, so that the child feels it's worth being in that classroom. that is the caregiving. And the courage giving, as I think I said, probably just saying, you know, that's great, whatever they've done. If they can't speak, then you can say, wow, your writing's brilliant. You know, that's really coming along. Find a way to praise a child, but make it authentic, because children will know very soon if you're saying that something's very good and it isn't. That's important. Be sincere, but find something good to say about everybody. Okay.
One more question very quickly, this I just noticed here, is about the age range for young learners exams. A few people are asking about what age people have to be to take starters, movers and flyers. And we don't, it's very hard to specify exact ages. We say that they're suitable for people in primary or lower secondary education, but of course that varies a lot from country to country at what age children start primary education and what age they reach different levels.
Yes.
So that's the guidance we give. You need to be able to read and write, obviously. Children need to be able to read and write, or type, because you can take it on a computer as well.
Yeah.
And the best advice I would give is to look at the website and see the free sample materials and just see if they...
And then decide for yourselves.
Exactly.
Because every situation is different. Well, thank you very much for attending today, and I hope you found it useful. And we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. The next webinar coming up is on use of digital resources to support effective learning and exam success. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.